surveillance threatens to break the internet. Now, this was the same guy who said, if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. I mean, is it a sign that the NSA surveillance has so destabilized the very structure of the internet that even people like Eric Schmidt are now paranoid that it could break the entire World Wide Web?
Well, perhaps maybe Eric Schmidt should have discussed this with Keith Alexander at the several Bilderberg meetings they attended together. Maybe he should have expressed his concerns then before this got out of hand. But yeah, it's typical. These CEOs from the Silicon Valley companies and you know, and all these other high-tech companies, at first they defend you know, NSA, or at least they don't say anything critical of them, and then they find out, oh my God, it's worse than I thought. But you know, I mean, yeah, he had more than enough opportunity to make these concerns known personally to Alexander, and I'm sure he will in the future when Alexander's replacement, Admiral Mike Rogers, attends these same conclaves. It seems like Bilderberg loves to have the NSA director at all their meetings these days. So let Schmidt and the other these other high-tech gurus complain to them in person at the next one.
JJ in Texas, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen. Go ahead, JJ.
Hey, Mr. Madsen. Good to talk to you today. How's it going over there?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I have a comment about 9/11 since that came up. Isn't it strange that our government flew out the family of the wanted hijacker behind 9/11, Osama bin Laden? All his family got to fly out. Isn't that a false flag there, number one? And number two, isn't it true that Pakistan's intelligence is called ISI?
Yes.
Now, is there any correlation between ISIS and Pakistan?
That's not determined, except one thing I discovered in Iran, that we now know that ISIL is crossing over the Iraqi border into Iran using some kind of open smuggling routes in the Kurdish area in the northern part of Iran, where a lot of stuff that's basically illegal in Iran is smuggled by mostly Armenian businessmen, things like beer, for example, and that ISIL's using these same smuggling routes to get their people across. At the same time, Pakistan, there's a group there called Jundallah, which is a Baluchi terrorist group that's supported by the United States. Depending on what day of the week it is and how much money is being paid off by the CIA, this Jundallah will make forays into Iran and commit terrorist attacks. Now, Pakistan sometimes cracks down on this group, and that's ISI, that's the Pakistani intelligence service. But other times, if they're paid off, they leave this group alone. So that's the only. But you can see the problem. If ISIL goes into Iran from the west, and Jundallah decides to go in from the east, that's sort of a pincer action. And then with the MEK active also on the border, obviously we could see this situation spreading to Iran in a very bad way. As far as the bin Laden family was flown out of the United States, so there wasn't really that we were told there was this no-fly policy. There were a lot of planes flying after 9/11 we weren't told about. One of which was the 747 that took the bin Laden family and dropped them off in Paris and Geneva. And they flew in from various locations around the country. Yeah, we protected bin Laden's family, but we did very little to protect the first responders who have died and are very sick in New York and Washington, D.C.
JJ, thanks for the call. Vac in Wisconsin, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen. Go ahead, Vac. Vac's gone. We've got Tom in New Jersey. You're on the air, Tom. Go ahead.
Good day, Mr. Madsen and Mr. Watson. My question, Mr. Madsen, is the Mr. Duncan in Dallas, Texas. They're calling him Patient Zero, but Patient Zero happened last year in December in Guinea, I believe. It was a 2-year-old boy. The origin of Ebola, they're trying to say, is either, of course, infected animal corpses or fruit bats. But they leave out the last shell, which could be, of course, a 2-year-old boy getting vaccinations.
Yeah, I tell you, when they talk about the guy who died, Mr. Duncan in Texas, as being patient zero, obviously we know that there there are now maybe 5,000 people in West Africa who have died of this disease, and I may be lowballing that number. We're not getting, and for Obama to send the military over to deal with a public health issue, I really question whether AFRICOM, which was designed to protect U.S. business interests, oil interests, and other interests in Africa, is well placed to deal with this developing pandemic in West Africa. So one thing the military does do when they go into an area, they tend to keep nosy journalists out. They put what's called an information cone over the area where no independent news goes out. That's what I'm very skeptical and suspicious about with Obama's deployment of troops into West Africa.
Okay, thanks for the call. Yeah, so picking up on that, Wayne, I mean, we've seen Chinese economic expansion in Africa outstripping the US. So do you believe that this Ebola outbreak and other so-called crises like that are being used as pretext to send US troops into the region to establish strongholds that will later benefit economically the US military-industrial complex in that region?
It could very well be. We're already in there to fight these groups that are active now in West Africa as a result of the neocons' foolhardy project to get rid of Gaddafi in Libya. That just turned out all this weaponry and these jihadists who are now active in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and with Boko Haram in Nigeria and Ansar Dine in northern Mali. And other countries. So these American troops are supplementing troops that are already in West Africa. Now, the one country that has provided top shelf medical care to West Africa is Cuba. And we know because of this ridiculous quarantine or boycott we've had against Cuba, they've developed this medical system that is far beyond anything we have in the United States that's affordable. And they have dispatched their doctors to West Africa. And so Cuba dispatches top quality doctors and we send the military in. I mean, you just got to wonder who's in charge of things in Washington, D.C. And when, and the people in West Africa know that that they see these Cuban doctors are they're going to start getting the best medical care available. And I don't care what Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and her gang of gusanos in South Florida have to say about it. Those Cubans are needed in West Africa, and we should, if anything, we should be using our military planes to fly more Cuban doctors over there.
Switching topics now, Ukraine, I know this is something you've been focusing on in the past. We've seen a kind of quieting of tensions in recent weeks. We've had a ceasefire, Putin withdrawing troops from eastern Ukraine. Do you see that crisis as ebbing away, or is it going to spark back into life here in the near future?
Well, that crisis is now going from sort of the battlefield to the corporate boardrooms throughout Europe and also the Middle East, because winter is now approaching. And this idea of sanctions on Russia, which affects their ability to ship their natural gas and other energy supplies to Western Europe, is really starting to impact on Western Europe. And we already seen now unemployment rise in Germany as a result of this ill-conceived these ill-conceived sanctions against Russia. French farmers are now dumping their produce that they would normally sell to Russia in town squares. And all we get from Francois Hollande, the French president, is more talk about more EU sanctions. Look, that was a coup d'etat in Kiev by a bunch of neo-Nazis and fascists, and it was Victoria Nuland at the State Department who promoted that, and now we have a German news report that the Ukrainian army, they wear helmets with swastikas and SS symbols on them. I mean, this is no wonder Russia doesn't. You do something like that, and Russia remembers what happened in World War II. 25 million Soviet citizens lost their lives as a result of the German Nazi attack on Russia. And to have Ukrainian troops wearing Nazi helmets going in to kill Russian-speaking people in eastern Ukraine, I would have reacted as much as Putin did.
Okay, coming up after the break, your calls for Wayne Madsen, 1-800-259-9231. Stay right there, Infowars.com. We're back on the Alex Jones Show live talking to Wayne Madsen. Going to go to another of your calls here in a minute. But the great line of health products at Infowars.com continues to impress. And now we've got X2. With all the madness going on in the world, you need to get your supply of ultra-strength Survival Shield X2. This is nascent iodine. And of course, I take iodine back home. It tastes like absolute garbage. This doesn't have that bad taste that's associated with many of the common iodine solutions on the market. It's time to get prepared with Survival Shield X2 from InfoWarsLife.com. Secure yours at InfoWarsLife.com and store it in your preparedness pack or home cabinet. Of course, iodine protects against radiation exposure. It's also got many other health benefits, purifies your system, and the X2 solution is available at InfoWarsLife.com. Final call for Wayne Madsen. It's Julio in Wyoming. Julio, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Good afternoon to both, Wayne. Been a big fan of yours for a while. It's also nice to see my former senator, Mark Kirk, have some nice comments for you, Wayne Madsen. He had some positive things to say about you, so it's nice to see Mark Kirk showing his true colors. I want to ask you, I've spoken to you about this before, about how big blackmail is and how so many of these political actors are, pretty much hold to a noose because of blackmail. And we know our good friend Barry Soetoro and his relationships with Mr. Sinclair or Reggie Love. All of these actors are blackmailed. Can you elaborate on that? And secondly, Vice Media. I know that you've written so many articles on your website about Vice, and they have Uncle Rupert's money as well as Uncle George's money, Soros and Murdoch behind it. They covered Ukraine. You talked about the neo-Nazis. It's not surprising Vice Media would support what was happening in Ukraine when Senator McCain openly spoke at the Brookings Institute with Senator Murphy of Connecticut about a technocracy in Ukraine, and we know how technocratic regimes in Greece and Italy have worked thus far. So can you elaborate on those two issues?
Yeah, on Vice, of course, that's also involves Bill Maher, who produces their program on HBO. And I just would caution people about the news reports coming out of North Korea about the status of Kim Jong-un. Don't believe them, because a lot of them are being filtered through Vice. And they were the ones who accompanied Dennis Rodman over there on his trip. Take whatever they say with a grain of salt. We know that Bill Maher is an Islamophobe. We know that. Thank God Ben Affleck called him and that other clown Sam Harris out on their Islamophobia on the Maher program. But Vice not to be believed. That it's more trash journalism on blackmail. Oh yes, absolutely. You mentioned McCain, and what do they got on this guy? I mean, obviously he's blackmailed 3 ways from Sunday. They know he was singing like a canary to his North Vietnamese captors. For 6 months, he was giving operational schedules for U.S. Flights, attack flights into North Vietnam. He also was responsible for the terrible fire on the USS Forrestal that killed over 200 naval personnel, and he was the first guy taken off because they knew he was responsible because of his hotshot antics. They called him Johnny Wet Start because he would flame his engine out as a form of hazing.
We'll be back after the break with Wayne Madsen. I'm going to take one more call. Stay tuned. This is Infowars.com. Keep it locked in. It's the final hour of the Alex Jones Show Live. I'm Paul Joseph Watson, sitting in for Alex. We're talking to NSA whistleblower and investigative journalist Wayne Madsen. Going to go to another of your calls right now. The website for Wayne, by the way, is WayneMadsenReport.com. We're going to go to Austin in Michigan. You're on the air. Go ahead, Austin.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. Go ahead.
I was calling about a number of things. One of the things I wanted to ask about things going on with Russia and Ukraine, as well as Ebola and stuff. Could that also be like a preset, kind of a fog of war for things that might possibly be going on in North Korea or China? that China's trying to do?
Well, I can. One thing about ISIL that I also discovered from talking to journalist colleagues that gathered in Tehran for this journalism, and many professors were there as scholars, whatnot, is that ISIL's leadership was controlled by some North Africans. And a couple of weeks ago, the CIA and their other controllers went in and had Chechen